So before I start, just a couple of things I'd like to do. Make sure we close on time so we can get everyone to the 3 o'clock general session, and then to wine, which I think is what everyone wants to do at the end of a conference. But before we do that, I just want to recognize there are a lot of people in the audience that were contributors to the consent track. So before we talk about Sean and Mark, if anyone here was a speaker, presenter, panelist, helper, table expert, just stand up for a moment. I'd like to recognize all of you and give you a round of applause. Yeah. There are also a few amazing people wearing blue shirts, and some of them not, who, without their support and help, video, technology, including getting my closing remarks on here in the last nick of the time second, I'd like to recognize you and thank you as well. And finally, to Mark and Sean, I know from trying to work with them, but the amount of work that goes into pulling this off and getting this many people in the same place to be able to coordinate and everything is immense. And their leadership, both individually and as a group, I think speaks a lot about the future in the space. So I just want to thank them as well for all of their work and contributions. When I clap, I get an extra clap. An echo. All right, cool. All right, so closing remarks. I wasn't here a year ago, but I've talked to a lot of people that were here a year ago. And I think my closing remarks are possibly cautionary, positive, and at the end I'm going to ask for a covenant between all of us. So I'm not going to do you the disservice of just trying to summarize what you've heard, but rather I'm going to try and interpret what I've listened to and maybe make a call to action between all of us if I could. So we're trying to change the world here. This is good stuff. Let's talk about the positives for a moment. You know, I'm fortunate that having got in my 5th year of doing this, but when I'm speaking to customer or regulator or market participant, other startup, it's amazing how many people naturally gravitate to the concept of what MyData stands for and what it means, or kind of, you know, the nobility behind our purpose. And I don't want anyone to forget that, because it's really easy as we start to get all engaged with everything to kind of forget just how important it is, the task that we have at hand. And I think that should be a guiding principle for all of us, because it takes a lot of work to kind of get to that moral high ground. It's a pretty tall peak sometimes. And it can be inconvenient along the way. But I think that takes humility and grace and cooperation for us to get there. And sometimes, if you're on a boat crossing the ocean and you've seen nothing but water for a long time and you see land, the first time you see it, it's really exciting. Everyone kind of goes, land ho! And it's just kind of that shape on the horizon. But as you get closer and closer, it gets more defined. Right? There's shoals. There's a soft landing on a beach. There's a peak. There's river. There's opposition. Who knows? So as we get closer to our destination, it's going to define itself more and more and more. And with that, we need to be more flexible. We need to find ways in which we can work with each other and understand some of those roadblocks that are going to show up that we haven't even realized yet that are going to come. And so the approaching horizon means that we're learning about the regulatory situation. Not just the ones we have now, but all the ones that are coming. And not just in Europe, but globally, because it needs to be truly interoperable. The ecosystem members and the new players that haven't even shown up on the scene yet, you know, to be welcoming to them, to be inviting, to listen. To try and understand where the kind of standardization place is going to go. How are we going to bring this many teams together, this many groups, so many stakeholders, and find ways in which we can communicate? And I think the expert workshops we work through helped us identify just how sometimes complex it is to even come around common vocabulary still at this very critical time. And, you know, the deep understanding of purpose and context, because although it's a consent workshop and that's the driving framework, we realize the complexities that immediately come out of that in terms of understanding what is the purpose, limitation, and use, what is the context around it, what are the limitations and permissions. And so it's consent and tied to what the rights come out of those consent. And, you know, what is the future going to be? Will we be shipping consent servers? Like, is everyone going to have a consent server in their company? I heard someone suggesting that. Is it going to be a global consent server with an S at the end? Massive data marketplaces. I don't even think we really yet know what it's going to look like. And I think that's fascinating. So as the land comes over the horizon, I think we need to have a lot of awareness to just how complex our space is becoming. So I would kind of bring it along that I don't think any of us can go it alone. Is anyone here a cyclist? Great, cool. For those of you that are not, there'll be a little cool thing coming. So, you know, you can put your head down and pedal as fast as you can, but sometimes with your head down, you're not always up and looking around. But more importantly, you know, I look around and I see an absolutely brilliant group of talented people, all passionate, all dedicated, and all caring about where we're going. And, you know, we're going to at some point bump into, you know, the King Gaffer people. You know, is it going to be a Google, an Apple, Facebook, or an Amazon, or a Microsoft, or even Salesforce was mentioned in a prior session today? And how are we going to work with those players? Is it going to be an indie or a startup or a new unicorn that springs out of nowhere? Will sovereign be the future? Will the public and the government take a more considered role? We're in a place where both, I've learned, you know, that Finland and Estonia, although they're doing brilliant things, there's a very strong representation of government's role in the future. Are we going to do it yourself? We're seeing already apps being delivered where there is no other framework other than kind of a make-it-yourself approach. Or will we surrender to AI? All great questions. I don't think we know yet. But what it means is there's a tapestry of players in the marketplace. And if you know something about cycling, then you've probably heard of something called a peloton. Now, a peloton's a fascinating thing. A peloton is actually faster than any single cyclist can ever be. And there's a reason why, because they divide the wind resistance between them. And there's a reason why in every large cycling race, a peloton is kind of the driving force at the front. And you do get breakouts, and they get gobbled up usually for any of you that kind of watched it on TV. And the peloton is actually a fundamental dynamic of groups working together, individual riders working together in a group format towards a common good. And so, in the peloton approach, I think we need to overlay what we're doing and think about that. And I think we're stronger off together dividing the wind resistance and dealing with the hills and the troubles of the land as it kind of comes closer to us. And so, you know, some people have said they're surprised we don't have as much progress between last year's MyData and this year. And I can't comment on that, I wasn't there, but I did listen to their comments. And I'm wondering maybe if that is, as land approached, a whole bunch of people got really excited. I think necessarily so, because it's a really, really noble thing that we're involved in. And we're all chasing after that. And I think what I really want to encourage, and I'd like to suggest as a covenant between all of us, is by the time we get to MyData 2018, that we are really finding additional ways in which we can really work with each other. And I don't think we're not. I actually have seen amazing efforts at everywhere I go in this session, everywhere I go in the expert workshop, when I go outside, there's just groups huddling, all sharing ideas. And I know that the venture place and the capital markets are very subtly starting to stand behind this new world. And so I think there's actually a tremendously good framework for us to work forwards. And so I really look forward to hopefully seeing all of you. Do we know where it is next year? Yeah.
So probably right here.
Probably right here. So with that, if I could just maybe give it back to Mark or Sean if you have anything further you want to say, but I just want to thank you all for your time and effort, your attendance, and your interest, and wish you the very best for the rest of your conference and your trip home if you have to travel home.